Well, so in this video, we are going to talk about profit maximization and a competitive supply. So far in intermediate microeconomics, we discuss two major portions. One is related to the consumer theory, in which we try to find out the utility maximization. And the second part is regarding production, in which we try to minimize the cost. So these both optimization, like a utility maximization and cost minimization, we learn in these two parts. Now the third part of the course is talking about the different market structures and how we can maximize our profit under different market structures. So the first in this particular part, the first topic is competitive supply. So profit maximization and competitive supply, that's the topic of our chapter. Let's see what we're going to discuss in this whole chapter. The first part of this chapter is covering perfectly competitive market, the definition, the broader, how we can define that a market is a perfectly competitive market as compared to other different forms of markets. Then what is meant by the profit maximization and how the firm in a competitive market decide how they can maximize their profit. With relation to that profit maximization, there are a few topics. That's a marginal revenue, marginal cost, and profit maximization. So profit maximization is basically dependent on how we find out the marginal cost and marginal revenue, and where they are equating, that is one the profit maximizing in quantity and price. Choosing output in the short run, that's a way that how the firms in a short run decide their output in a competitive market. Competitive firm short run supply curve and short run market supply curve. So that's in first part we mostly discussing the short run phenomena related to a firm operating in a competitive market. But in the second part we change our scenario from the short run to the long run in choosing output in the long run as well as industry's long run supply curve. So let's first define what is a perfectly competitive market or a competitive market. So when we are saying perfectly, it means that it's an ideal market in which there are many buyers, many sellers, and the firms operating in that particular market is taking the price from the market. So whenever they want to sell their product, they are not deciding the price. The price is decided by the market demand and supply forces, and they are compelled to sell their products on that particular price which market the price which is prevailing in the market. So because each individual firm sells a sufficiently small proportion of the total market, as there are many buyers and many sellers, so each buyer and each seller is a very small tiny component of the whole market. So that's the one thing. So its decision has no impact on the market price. So if a tiny bit of a seller decide to sell more or less, is not going to affect the market. So the main idea of this competitive market is a price taker, and we use the word this price taker. So what does it mean? The seller is taking the price from the market. He is not deciding the price at which he is going to sell. He is taking the price from the market. For example, if someone wants to sell us stocks in the stock market, so normally what we do, we ask the price from the market that today at this moment what is the price, and then you have to make a decide. Okay, if you want to sell, you can sell at this price. If the price, if you want to sell at any price in your mind, but that is not possible at that moment because the market price is different. So you only sell at the market price if you want to sell it. Similarly, that's the case for the agriculture produce as well. The farmers take their produce to the market, grain market, and the grain market people decide, okay, today the price, because of the demand and supply, the price is this. So if the farmer wants to sell at that on that particular day, they can sell it at this. So that's what we call it as a price taker. You can also identify by yourself that what is the price taker means, that if you want to sell something which is in a competitive market, so if you set a price and no one shows interest, so what you do, you reduce the price. If even then no one shows up or shows their interest to buy it, so what you do, you further reduce. So ultimately you settle the price where there is someone is willing to buy, and by this way the transaction or this whole deal is going to be done, where the buyer is ready. So it means that the market is deciding the price, whatever the price you tag it, but that's not the possibility that you can sell it. You have to adjust the price according to the market. Now the second characteristics of a competitive market is a product homogeneity. Like the product is of a homogeneous nature or a very similar nature, so there is no differentiation, there is no distinction. For example, if we put a milk from two different forms in a glass, so we cannot identify which milk is from which form. Similarly, if you hold two eggs from different forms, you cannot identify which egg is from there. Or similarly, any vegetable, any fruit, any agriculture produce, or there are certain products like a gas. If you take gas from two different gas stations, you cannot identify. So these are means that these are homogeneous products. So there is no thing that you can identify, that when the products of all the firms in a market are perfectly substitute with one another, that is when they are homogeneous. So it means that they are perfect substitute for each other. Sorry for this interruption, because my throat is not today is perfect, so maybe. So no firms can raise the price of its product above the price of other firms without losing most or all of its business. So there is, because the projects are perfect substitute, so if someone raise the price, so other move towards the other goods, so all the buyers going to move to the other goods. So this way you are not able to sell your goods at a higher price than the market price, because no one is willing to buy it. In contrast, when the products are heterogeneous, means differentiated, each firm has the opportunities to raise the price. And we can see like the coffee from a Starbucks or coffee from a Tim Horton, although both are coffees, but they are charging different prices because they differentiate. They are heterogeneous product in the way that they have some features that is not available with the Starbucks, and with that is not available with the Tim Hortons. So they are treating them at a separate. Same is the case with the cell phone, like an iPhone and Samsung. Although both are smartphones, but they are different. So that's what we call it as a heterogeneous. So each firm has the opportunity to raise its price above its competitors without losing all of its sales. So the assumption of product homogeneity is important because it ensures that there is a single market price consistent with the supply and demand analysis. The third condition for a competitive market is a free entry and exit. Free entry or exit conditions under which there are no special costs that make it difficult for a firm to enter or exit an industry. So it means that the industry is free for any firm to enter or any existing firm to leave or exit. So there is no conditions. So with the free entry and exit, buyers can easily switch from one supplier to another, and suppliers can easily enter or exit a market. And that condition we will discuss in detail. That conditions make it possible that only efficient firms can sustain in the business. Inefficient firms cannot sustain in the business. Or if there is any economic profit, new firms enter and the supply increase, and by this way the prices will go down. So this is the way that it works: entry and exit, free entry and exit. So when is a market highly competitive? When we say that the market is highly competitive, many markets are highly competitive in the sense that firms face highly elastic demand curves and relatively easy entry and exit. But there is no simple rule of thumb to describe whether a market is close to being perfectly competitive. Because firms are implicitly or explicitly collude in setting price, the presence of many firms is not sufficient for an industry to approximate perfect competitions. Conversely, the presence of only a few firms in a market does not rule out a competitive behavior. So what we want to explain here is that the only condition that there are many firms cannot fulfill that it is a competitive market, but because there is a possibility that they collude each other and setting the price according to their own choice. Very few firms in the market is also not necessarily that the market is not competitive. There is a possibility that the few firms are there and they are competing with each other rigorously, and by this way there is a competition. So free entry and exit is also one of the very basic requirement for a competitive market. Now, profit maximization. That's the question, and that's the main idea of this chapter is the assumption of profit maximization. We assume that every firm in the business is for profit, and definitely as a rational actor in the market, they are trying their best to maximize their profit. The assumption of profit maximization predicts business behavior reasonably accurately and avoid unnecessary analytical complication. For smaller firms, profit is likely to dominate almost all decisions. In larger firms, however, why we are saying in a smaller firm, because some smaller firms are managed and run by the owners by themselves, so they are always taking care of the profit. But in the larger firms, because we know that in a corporation, the stocks owners are separate and the managers who are running the business are separate. So there is a possibility that there have some other importances as well as compared to the profit, but in a smaller firms, profit is the prime importance. However, managers who make day-to-day decisions usually have a little contact with the owners. Managers may or may concern with such a goals as a revenue maximization, revenue growth, and all this. So firms that do not come close to the profit maximization are not likely to survive. As there is a free entry and exit, and market price is determined by the market, so there is a possibility that only the firms, those who are not or those who are inefficient, their prices are or their costs are high and they cannot compete with the market price. So by this way, only those who are maximizing their profit and minimizing their cost can survive. And so for that reason, we said that the profit maximization is one of the highest priority for a business operating in a competitive market. The other forms of a business that can exist other than this competitive firm or a firm operating in a competitive market is a cooperative. But the cooperative has a very limited scope in the sense that their objective is to serve the members of a cooperative. It's not necessary that they are doing for the profit. So a cooperative association of business or a people jointly owned and operated by members for mutual benefit. That's a mutual benefit. Now the question here raises that in many parts of the world, and especially the New York, the condominium or a condo, simple words we can say that the full word is condominium, but in short we call it as a condo. Housing unit that is individually owned but provided access to common facilities that are paid for and controlled jointly by an association of owners. So nationwide, condos are far more common than co-ops, outnumbering them by a factor of nearly 10 to 1. So there are two types here we are discussing. One is condos in which there is a strata, and strata run the common areas and they collect the fee for that. And there is another way that we can own a building, and that's what we call it as a co-ops. Means that they create a society or a cooperative society, and by this way each owner of the apartment or in the building is become the member of the co-op. So we see that the condos or condominiums are 10 and the co-ops are only 1 as compared to the whole USA economy. But New York is unique in a sense, is very different from the rest of the nation. Co-ops are more popular and outnumber condos by a factor of 4 to 1. Many building restrictions in New York have long disappeared, and yet the conversion of an apartment from co-ops to condos has been relatively slow. The typical condominium apartment is worth about 15.5% more than equivalent apartment held in the form of a co-op. Clearly, holding an apartment in the form of a co-op is not the best way to maximize the apartment's value. It appears that in New York, many owners have been willing to forego substantial amount of money in order to achieve non-monetary benefits of a co-ops. So that's a explanation regarding the two forms of a business and how they can sometimes they sacrifice their profit in order to get the other benefits. Now here we are talking about in real sense that what is profit maximization and how we can maximize the profit. So if we want to write a profit function, and here we are writing here a profit function. So pi q means that if we are selling this much quantity, q is a quantity, number of units, sorry, number of units we are selling, and pi represents a profit. So how we can write the profit function? The revenue function minus the cost function. So this one is a revenue function and this one is the cost function. So revenue minus cost is always a profit, and very simple in accounting as well. We calculate the profit by subtracting cost from the revenue. Now this one is our revenue function, or a curve we draw with the revenue, and this red line is a cost function. So we see here below this point of output, like Q0, the cost is higher than the revenue, so firms are making losses. And after this Q1, again the situation is like this, that the costs are higher than revenue, so these are two loss zones. So the firm has only option to operate between Q0 and Q1. Now which point the firm should operate? Here, 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 or here? So the ideal point is this point, or a profit maximizing point is this point. Why? Because if you look at the graph, this is our revenue function and this is our cost function. And this is the only point, like A and B are the only points which creates the maximum distance or maximum difference between the revenue and the cost. All other points other than this A and B, if you find out the profit, which is revenue minus cost, you see the distance is small. So the profit maximization is at this point. Now how we can find out that what is the slope of this curve at this point? So if we take a marginal revenue at point A, right? And similarly marginal cost at point C. Now these two lines are tangent to the cost and revenue curve. Now if the line is tangent to that point, it means the slope of this line and slope at this point of this revenue curve is same. And similarly the slope of this revenue cost line and this line which is drawn tangent to that curve is also same. And these two lines are parallel to each other, and parallel lines are always having a same slope. If the slope is different, then they are not parallel, they can intersect at some point if the slope is not same. If the slope is same, they are parallel, they are not going to intersect at any point. So that's a condition for a parallel lines, that the slopes of those lines are same. So what we learn here is that the marginal revenue, which is the slope of the revenue function at this point, and the slope of the cost function at this point is equal to each other. So if you find out slope at any other point, you cannot find equal to each other. Why? Because they are not parallel. And any other point other than A and B, if you find out the slope of a revenue curve or the revenue function and the cost function, you cannot find out the same. They are different. Why? You can see, you can find out the tangent point at this and tangent point at this. You find out that their slopes are different. So we can say that a firm choose a quantity Q star, that's an ideal point, so that the profit difference between A and B, revenue R and C, is the maximized. At this point, the minor revenue, the slope of the revenue curve is equal to the marginal cost, the slope of the cost curve. And we see that this is our cost function. And why we are saying this is because these are equal, that's why we are saying 0. So this is our minor revenue and this is marginal cost. So they, at this point, they are 0. Or we can write it as minor revenue is equal to marginal cost. So that is the condition what we learn it here, that the profit maximizing output for any firm operating in a competitive market is minor revenue is equal to marginal cost. Now if now we want to learn it a little bit more, that what is a marginal revenue for a firm in a competitive market. So we know that in a competitive market, the market demand curve is downward sloping. So this is a market or an industry demand, the whole industry, whole market, like a market for cars, market for cell phones, market for computers, market for wheat, market for any other product. So it's downward sloping, whole market. But when we are talking about a one firm out of this whole market, because there are many firms in the whole market, so the one single firm, we call it as a firm in a competitive market or a competitive firm, the demand curve is horizontal. Sorry. Why it is horizontal? Because at this price, this firm can sell as much as they want. So this is why it is horizontal. So that's, you must have to be very clear in your mind that the demand for the whole market in a competitive market is downward sloping. But the demand curve for a firm in a competitive market is horizontal, because this is a very tiny component or a proportion of the whole market, so they can sell as much as they want. So because the price is given based on market demand and supply, so at this price, if he wants to sell more and more, he can sell. Now if this is the situation that there is a horizontal line, it means that the price is a minor revenue for that as well. It means that the price is a minor revenue for as well. And this is the demand curve, this is an average revenue curve, this is a minor revenue curve. So all these curves are collided, or you can say that they are all in a one curve, like demand curve, minor revenue curve, or average revenue curve. And this is also price. So that's the way that we can see. Because each firm in a competitive industry sell only a small fraction of the entire industry output, how much output the firm decided to sell will have no effect on the market price of the product. Because it is a price taker, the demand curve facing an individual competitive firm is given by a horizontal line. The demand curve, its average revenue curve facing an individual firm in a competitive market is both at its minor revenue curve. So all these three, demand, minor revenue, and average revenue, along this demand curve, minor revenue curve and average revenue curve, and prices are all equal. So we can say here, this is the minor revenue curve and the price and the marginal cost that is going to be equate in order to find out the profit maximizing quantity. A perfectly competitive firm choose to its output so that the marginal cost equals the price or the minor revenue. So we can see here, this is our marginal cost curve, this red line, this blue is ATC, average total cost, this blue is AVC, which is average variable cost, and this one is our demand curve, or we can say it is average revenue curve, minor revenue curve, or a price. So based on what we learn, the output, profit maximizing output is at point A. Why? Because at this point the average of marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Below this point the marginal cost is less and marginal revenue is higher, so it is good to produce more. Above this point, or if we go further beyond this point, then the cost is higher than the profit or the revenue. So that's again a loss profit for, right? And this is a lost profit for. So this is the ideal position where it is equal. Now at this equal point, this is our total average total cost, sorry, and this is the price. So the difference is going to be our profit. So, or we can say this rectangle, which is A, B, C, D, like A, B, C, D, that's a rectangle, that is the profit for this firm. Any change in output, whether lower at Q1 or higher at Q2, will leads to lower profits. It is not necessary that every time a firm in a competitive market is making profit. So there is a possibility that the firms are making losses as well. And if you look at this graph, the market price and the minor revenue for this firm is this, right? This line. The cost for this, average total cost for this is there. So the distance between the marginal revenue and average total cost is negative. So by this way, there is a possibility that this firm is going to be loss of A, B, C, D, this rectangle. Now, if that is the case, what is going to happen? The firm's going to shut down. Why it's going to shut down? A competitive firm shut down if the price is below the average variable cost. But in this case, if you look at very carefully, the price is not below the average variable cost. It is above the average variable cost. Although it is below the ATC, the firm is making losses, but even then it should continue. So what is a rule what we learned for in order to continue even the firms are making loss? If the price is greater than average variable cost, the firm should continue. If the price is less than AVC, then we should shut down. Now shut down, we have to be very careful. Shut down means that you stop the operations. You are bearing the fixed cost only and nothing else. So you bear the fixed cost and keep the business shut. It doesn't mean exit. So there is a difference between exit and shutdown. Exit means you leave the market for good, and you leave the market that you don't want to continue in future. This situation is called as an exit. But if you close down your operation for a while, for a temporary purpose, as the market prices are below, so you shut down. Now this shutdown is only good if the price is less than average variable cost, so it is good to shut down. If it is higher but it is less than ATC, even the firms are making losses, but it is good to continue because by this way you are at least covering your fixed cost and some portion of the variable cost as well. So here is an example of again the aluminum. The short-run output decision of an aluminum smelting plant. How should the manager determine the plant's profit maximizing output? So we already learned that the manager has to decide where the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Recall that the smelting plant's short-run marginal cost of production depends on whether it is running 2 or 3 shifts per day. So the short-run output of an aluminum smelting plant. In the short run, the plant sorry. The plant should produce 600 tons per day. If the price is above 1140 tons per ton, but less than 1300 per ton. If the price is greater than 1300 per ton, it should run an overtime shift and produce 900 tons. So why? You see, if the price is this, like 1140, then they have to produce 600. If the price is above 1300, then it is good to produce 900. So we determine the quantity based on the price. Some most cost consideration for managers, like the application of the rule that marginal revenue should equal marginal cost depends on manager's ability to estimate marginal cost. First, except under limited circumstances, average average variable cost should not be used as a substitute for marginal cost. So average variable cost is not a marginal cost. So here is an example. Current output is 100 units per day, 80 of which are produced during sorry 80s are 100 units per day, 80 of which are produced during the regular shift, and 20 of which are produced during overtime. Material cost is 80 per unit for all units, and labor cost is 30 per unit for a regular shift and 50 per unit for the overtime shift. For the 80 units of output, average variable cost and the marginal cost are both equal to $38, because this is the material and this is the labor what we are charging, so 38. So when our output increased to 100, marginal cost is higher than average variable cost. So a manager who relies on average variable cost will produce too much. Now up till 80, 38 variable cost of labor and variable cost of material, if you add up, that's our marginal cost. But after 80, the average cost is going to be changed, because now the labor is of a $50. So then you cannot take the average variable cost as a marginal cost, because the marginal cost is now different. Also, a single item on firm's accounting ledger may have two components, only one of which involves a marginal cost, like a variable cost. Finally, all opportunity costs should be included in determining marginal cost. These three guidelines can help a manager to measure marginal cost correctly. Failure to do so can cause production to be too high or too low, and thereby reducing the profit. So again, we are taking the same. I'm gonna take back. So the firm supply curve is the portion of the marginal cost curve for which the marginal cost is greater than the average variable cost. So short-run supply curve for a competitive firm. In the short run, the firm chooses to its output, so the marginal cost is equal to the price as long as the firms cover its average variable cost. So the point which we want to make it here is, like, if you see this marginal cost curve, because the firm is only going to produce when the price is higher than average variable cost, so the supply curve is going to start from this point onward. So marginal cost curve is a supply curve, but only above average variable cost. Below average variable cost, marginal cost is there, the marginal cost curve is there, but that is not going to serve as a the supply curve, because there is no supply below the average variable cost. The firm's response to an input price change. So if the input price change, the response to a firm's to the change in input price when the marginal cost of a production for a firm increases from M1 to MZ1, the level of output that maximize profit falls from Q1 to. We see here, if the cost increase, so this is going to be our new cost curve, and we see that the output is going to be reduced from this point to this point. The short-run production to the petroleum products. Although plenty of crude oil is available, the amount that you refine depends on the capacity of the refinery and the cost of production. So the short-run production of a petroleum product, as the refinery shifts from one processing unit to another, the marginal cost of producing petroleum products from crude oil increases sharply by several levels of output. So this step, this short-run supply curve, this step is saying that you are starting a new plant, and this new plant increase the cost. So the short-run marginal cost curve is a sharp increase. So industry supply in the short run, the industry supply is the summation of the supply curves of each individual firm in the market. So we see here, this is MC1 for a firm 1, firm 2, firm 3, and all together when we add up, we get this red line, which is the market supply curve. So because the firm has a lower average variable cost than the first two firms, the market supply S begins at a price P1 and follow the marginal cost curve of the third MC3 until price is P2 when there is a kink. So we can see here there is a kink because of the change in the supply at that point, because at that point the firms are adding up, all the two other firms are adding up. At the price of one, only firm 1 is producing. So that's the way that we can say. For P2, all prices above, the industry quantitative supplied is the sum of a quantity supplied by each of the three firms. Elasticity of market supply, how we can calculate it. We already learned the formula for calculating elasticity as a percentage change in quantity, or we can say that percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. The short-run world supply of a copper, we say that the cost of mining, smelting and refining copper differ because of a difference in labor and transportation cost, and because of difference in the copper contents of the core. So we can see that Australia marginal cost is this, Canada this is the marginal cost, Chile, Indonesia, Peru, Poland, Russia, US, Zambia. So we can see that Zambia or you can say Russia, these have a very low cost of production or a marginal cost of production. So if the price of copper is going to increase, then the Canada or Australia jump in to produce. Otherwise they are not in a position to produce because their marginal costs are very high as compared to the other countries. So the short run supply of copper, the world copper supply is determined by summing each nation's supply horizontally. The elasticity of supply depends on the price of copper. At relatively low price, the curve is quite elastic because small price increase leads to a large increase in the quantity of copper supplied. At higher prices, say above 2.4 per pound, the curve becomes more inelastic because at those prices, most producers would be operating close to or at its capacity. Further increase is not so easy. So the supply curve for world copper is obtained by summing the marginal cost curves for each of the major copper producer countries. The supply curve slopes upward because the marginal cost of production ranges from a low of 1.3 in Russia to a higher of 2.6 in Canada. The short-run market supply curve, producer surplus and consumer surplus. Here we are just focusing on producer surplus. Sum over all the units produced by a firm of a difference between the market price of a good and the marginal cost of the production. So producer surplus for a firm, a producer surplus of a firm is measured by the yellow area below the market price and above the marginal cost curve between 0 and Q star, the profit maximization output. So we see this yellow area, this whole yellow area is a producer surplus. Alternatively, it is equal to the rectangle ABCD because the sum of the all marginal cost to the producer surplus versus profit. So there is a difference of a producer surplus and the profit. So producer surplus is revenue minus variable cost. However, the profit is a revenue minus variable cost minus fixed cost. So the main difference between surplus and the profit is the fixed cost. Producer surplus for a market. The producer surplus for a market is the area below the market price and above the market supply curve between 0 and Q2 output. So this is whole is a producer surplus. So you must have to remember this, that in the producer surplus there is no thing that we can add up as a producer fixed cost. But in profit, when we want to calculate the profit here, we have to take care of the fixed cost as well. So this is all what we're going to discuss in a part 1. Now we will discuss the remaining portion, which is long run framework for the profit maximization in a competitive market. So let's see you in the second part.